Oops. Oopsie, that was exciting. Hang on. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's Thursday morning here in Yokohama. We would like to thank everyone who's joining from around the world. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from we're live in Yokohama at the Pacifica North Building. It's an excellent facility, so we thank very much the hosts, one of whom is in the room. So, thanks to Mark Briere and team at WIDE, and I think it's Keio University. We are Gaia, the global access to the internet for all, and a shout out to Arjuna, who's one of the founders of Gaia. You have Curtis, Heimerl, and Jane here. We're the co-chairs, and we have a good lineup for you today. Please help with the notes if you have time. The agenda is going to be is right there if you want to take a look in the meeting materials. My job and Curtis's job is just to guide you through some administrivia. Please take note of the note well, which is in the meeting materials for the IETF 116. Each of our speakers will have 20 minutes with 10 minutes for Q&A. And then Curtis and I may have some updates for you toward the end after we have our great speakers speak up. The first person on the agenda is Steve Song. It's with Mozilla. And I'm going to queue up your slides, Steve, and we will carry on in 2 seconds. Oops. Give me 1 second. Presentation view. There we go. Steve, you're up. And thanks very much for helping us out today with your presentation. Oh, I'll give you a 5-minute warning, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone, and greetings from Wednesday evening, the day before. I'm in Nova Scotia, Canada, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today or tomorrow. I'm a policy advisor with the Mozilla Corporation, who make the open source Firefox browser. And what I'm going to talk to you today about is an open data standard for describing terrestrial fiber optic networks. Next slide, please. So this project began with an initiative that I began almost over 10 years ago, which was to try and map terrestrial fiber projects in Africa. And I naively assumed that that it would be possible to crowdsource the information, simply gathering network maps from various operators and producing a comprehensive picture. And what you see here is not bad. It's probably about 70% of the fiber networks in Africa. But once you begin to look at these individual networks, well, they're of varying ages, varying capacity, varying states of operation. And they all enjoy different kinds of ownership and other aspects, none of which is revealed in this map. And so the more I began to try and collect these sources of data, the more I realized that a more structured approach to mapping fiber was essential. Next slide, please. And indeed, as we begin to see internet infrastructure as an essential component of modern life. I think the pandemic has revealed to us just how fundamental it is to carrying on in difficult circumstances. Well, if we are going to really understand the challenge of connecting everyone to the internet affordably, we need better information, and that better information starts with the very foundations of the internet. That is the fiber optic cables that carry the vast amounts of internet traffic around the world. So next slide, please. This issue really only came home to me when a couple of researchers, Jonas Hjort and Jonas Poulsen, approached me to ask to use the data set that I'd compiled um, to build this map of terrestrial fiber cables in Africa. And they were able to take and download this data and combine it with employment data from the region and establish a positive correlation between proximity to fiber and employment levels. And, this, I don't know, really sort of turned on a light bulb in my head in terms of what it would mean, not just to have maps of fiber, but actual open data sets of fiber that could be recombined with other kinds of data, of socioeconomic data, to produce new insights. And I think this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what may be achieved. Next slide, please. And in terms of sharing, it's funny, some operators have no hesitation sharing detailed maps of their fiber network on their websites, in some cases downloadable, downloadable in KML or other, detailed data format. And others will not share their information at all. And the perceptions by these various by these operators in terms of what is appropriate in terms of sharing, is not grounded in anything except this is what we've always done. So part of the goal of this project, the Open Fiber Data Standard, is simply to create new norms for sharing and to build greater trust among operators to do so, because it's clear that the operators that are sharing their data haven't suffered any catastrophic failures as a result. Even here you can see there's a fiber network in Ukraine that is still sharing a map of its fiber network. Next slide, please. And there are existing initiatives to share fiber data. Probably the best one is the ITU transmission map. And the ITU, as a UN organization, is able to reach out through its membership, regulatory associations and ministries in member countries, to ask them to reach out to their operators to provide data to build a map of fiber networks around the world, which works reasonably well where operators are willing to share. They're able to display this data, but very often the operators only share data under an NDA, which means you get a great looking map, but you can't download that data to reveal the kinds of insights that I think are just waiting to be had. So while it's an excellent resource, because it's not open data, it's not accessible, it's not really useful as a research resource. Next slide, please. So thanks to some interest from the World Bank, who managed to bring the ITU into the discussions, and some fiber network operators such as Liquid Intelligent Technologies, possibly the largest fiber network operator on the African continent. C² operates metro fiber networks in a variety of major capitals in African countries. The Internet Society and the Digital Council Africa banded together to make common cause to promote common standards for describing fiber optic networks. And next slide, please. And the benefits of that, I mean, are pretty straightforward. I mean, I think the very first one is simply making smarter investments. So if you can actually have an accurate map of where existing fiber is and overlay it, say, over population data, then you can you can target investments where they can have the biggest impact. And here on the right-hand side, this is a map from Ghana, where fiber networks have been overlaid with rail networks and oil and gas pipeline networks, and power line infrastructure. And being able to overlay those different kinds of data can also reveal opportunities to deploy fiber in more affordable ways. It's much cheaper to run fiber along a power line or along a rail line than to actually, trench it in the ground. And having this data available can improve coordination in terms of investment and reduce the chances of physical network interruption. And indeed, once you have a common standard, you can actually then begin to look at accurate benchmarking from country to country, state to state. Next slide, please. But maybe the most remarkable benefit of having an open data standard is you can actually tell how much fiber you have in your country. Because right now, if you're a regulator and you require operators to submit maps of their fiber optic network to you, well, they may submit a map of where they argue that they have fiber, but is it their fiber? Is it dark fiber they've purchased from another operator? Is it lit capacity from another operator? This is a good example here. This is a map of fiber between Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo in Brazil. And you can see that there are what looks like eight fiber networks connecting to these, two major cities. But are they? Are they eight individual networks, or are they, two networks with four operators on each? We don't know. And unless there is an actual standard for operators to conform to describe their networks, we will never know. So countries that confidently post that they have 300,000 kilometers of fiber in their country, well, there's no basis for that, for an accurate picture of that, unless you actually are able to compare eggs with eggs. Next slide, please. And the next one. So this is good for operators as well. This is a news article from MTN in Ghana from last year, saying that it suffered from 939 fiber cuts in 5 months, which is must be some kind of record, I imagine. But and there are various reasons for that, but lack of information is definitely a key factor, and there is actually research to back that up. And so by promoting more transparency and creating standards for sharing, we can directly address this problem, which will actually reduce the amount, lower costs for operators, and also having more strategic information about where fiber exists. It is remarkable the number of times I have seen investment as actual duplication of infrastructure because two parallel processes were leading to investment in the same place. Part of the reason I think that operators don't want to share is that they don't want to be they don't want to share any more than their competitor. And so by creating these standards and norms, I think we can attack the problem of mistrust among operators to create a safer space for sharing. And of course, once you have a common data standard, you can have better network analysis tools. You can build tools that says, well, how many people live within 10 kilometers or 25 kilometers of a fiber point of presence in my region, for example. Next slide, please. So last year, the same partners I mentioned, we came together at the World Telecommunications Development Conference, and as part of an ITU initiative called Partner to Connect, which was and it is an initiative bringing together all kinds of corporations, organizations to make pledges to bridge the digital divide. We came to pledge to promote the collaborative development of open data standards in in the ICT infrastructure sector. And while this talk and the work that we're doing right now is on terrestrial fiber networks, it is our intent to stretch beyond that to look at towers, at spectrum, at backhaul pricing. The scope for open data in this space, I think, is significant. Next slide, please. And thanks to some support from the World Bank, we were able to contract a consulting company in the UK called Open Data Services. They're a cooperative, and they are arguably the leading expert in the world on the development of open data standards. They developed the beneficial ownership data standard, or were the technical backstop to the development of the beneficial ownership data standard, which describes company ownership, the International Aid Transparency Initiative, which is a standard for where bilateral, multilateral, and philanthropic agencies can share information about their giving. The open contracting standard for procurement. So they brought a lot of expertise and history to the development work with us, and it's been a genuine pleasure to work with them. Next slide, please. And just before I go on to describe the standard in a little bit more detail, I just want to give you an example of where an open data standard has worked tremendously well. So if you've used Google Maps to get around in New York or London or any other major capital, and you've used it to identify the transit points, the subway, the underground, the reason you can do that is because Google developed an open data standard for describing public transport. And you can see that here, that there are fields for tables for describing the trips, the routes, stop times, fares, and so on. And because all transit authorities can submit data in the same format, Google Maps is able to represent that data in a timely and meaningful way. Next slide, please. So what does the Open Fiber Data Standard do? Well, it gives people information about what they should publish about their fiber networks, and that is kind of a complicated question to answer, because there are some things that are sensitive information for companies, some things that are essential to be public in order for the data to be meaningful. But it starts with, oh, sorry, can we come back? It starts with the network, which then breaks down into what we call nodes and spans. So nodes would be what you would think of as a point of presence, and spans are is the network that connects to nodes. And that's really the heart of the standard. And the rest of it connects to who owns it, who operates it, who invested in it, when did it go live, what kinds of, what is the technical capacity of the network, et cetera, et cetera. It provides operators with a vocabulary and a structure for talking about their networks. And of course, it provides documentation to help people use the standard and apply it, and having applied it, software tools to validate it. So making sure that the data is consistent and whole and accurate. Next slide, please.
And you're at the 15-minute mark, Steve.
Okay, great, thanks. And so, like any good open data or open source initiative, it's available on GitHub, and you can download the standard, and the documentation is also available. Next slide, please. The documentation is for all of the fields and how they can be implemented and what are the constraints and on the use of the fields is all well documented in the Open Fiber Data Standard at the readthedocs.io. And indeed, the validation tool that can confirm that the data you've created is consistent with itself will accept data in Excel format, in comma-separated format, in GeoJSON, and JSON format. And as long as you can upload it in one of those formats, it will convert it to the other formats for you. So right now our focus has been on developing this standard, but the very next step for us as we work with operator associations around the world is to begin to develop the tools for displaying and interrogating and analyzing these data sets and maps. Next slide, please. And so in order now, having developed the standard and gone through a kind of alpha and beta process, and now we're at version, just on the verge of version 0.3 of the data standard, we've begun to sort of test it in the wild, as it were. In particular, we've been working with the regulatory agencies in Ghana and Kenya to introduce the standard and to develop mechanisms for its adoption. At the same time as we've been working with the regulatory associations, we're also working with the operator associations, hopefully with the goal of having the standard be voluntarily adopted by operators as opposed to mandated by the regulatory agencies, but sort of working, top down and bottom up in that context. And so next month with the Open Data Services, we'll be going to run workshops for operators and regulators in both of those countries. And while, in the meantime, the ITU has worked with the Brazilian government to render their national fiber optic network using the Open Fiber Data Standard. So we very much hope to see adoption happen in parallel as opposed to vertically once the tools are a little bit more robust and have been gone through a little more thorough testing in the wild. And that really brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to entertain questions or comments. The IETF is no stranger to standards processes, and the big challenge for us at the moment is setting up the governance processes for the standard and trying to do it in a way that is sufficiently democratic, but also lightweight enough to move forward quickly.
Thank you very much, Steve. We are now open for questions. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A for Steve, and of course at the end. And if you'd like to join the queue online, and I see Curtis has, you click on that first icon under your name, which is a hand. It looks like a hand for those joining online and I think we also need you to do that in the room just so that we can manage the queue in a hybrid fashion. So Curtis, over to you. You have a question.
Oh, no, I bet you can hear me now. Yes?
We can hear you now.
Excellent. Hi, Steve. How's it going? I guess my initial question is how you imagine organizations, or how do you imagine organizations using this standard? Is this individual telcos formatting their data in this way and sending it to you or to some centralized organization that manages all this, or do these organizations simply publish that data on their own websites for other people to crawl?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one to which I don't know the answer yet. I mean, our fundamental principle of the work has been to respect the sovereignty of the operators to control their own network information. And so ultimately that will be their decision. I expect there will be different kinds of data or sorry, different grades of open fiber data, and that there will be a subset that is available for public consumption. There'll be a subset that may be just available to an association of operators that might have a little more sensitive information, and there may be, a more robust version that is just private to the operator itself. I think in my perfect world, every operator would publish their own, and it would be harvested from them. I think that's probably not a practical reality, just in that it's not going to be something that people place enough priority on. I expect the operator associations in individual countries or the regulator, one or both of those, will likely become the linchpins for collecting that data. And in fact, it may be that regulators insist that reporting by operators arrives in the open fiber data standard format. And that would sort of solve a lot of problems, I think, if there was a kind of standardized reporting. All operators already report that data to regulators. So there is that kind of information flow already. It's just a question of standardizing it. And I think right now, we're learning more about how operators store this information. Somewhat surprisingly for me, most of it is just in Google Earth. Google Earth is a lovely tool, but it is horrible for metadata and structured data. So I think our next goal is really to develop the tools that will make it easy for operators to convert their data into the standard.
Thank you very much. We have Mark. Thank you, Curtis. We have Mark Briere up. He's in the room. Go ahead, Mark.
Hello. Hi, Steve. Nice work. I don't know if you contacted Telegeography, and because it could be a good organization. So actually collecting, even operators and telco are sending their data to Telegeography to merge and do some analysis for them. Some could be made at the poster and talk about what they have, talk telco per telco and so in different conferences. But then if they kind of embrace the standard you did and then say that for per telco, which one will be publishing openly the data they're already sending to Telegeography?
It's funny you should mention. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Just the main question is, have you started to talk to Telegeography?
No, we haven't spoken to Telegeography directly. They may well be a beneficiary of the standard and the publication of that data. I have to say, it's funny you should mention Telegeography, because they obviously publish the submarine fiber cable map, which I think probably everyone has seen. And they, up until very recently, they stored that data on GitHub under a Creative Commons license, so that anyone who wanted to use that submarine cable data could use it. Sadly, they've deleted their GitHub account, and now that data will cost you money to license. So I'm happy for any data that's public. Telegeography are welcome to use it and to bring whatever value add they want to that analysis. But Telegeography is in the business of selling that information, and that's which is totally cool. But they're not going to be the primary interlocutor for us. We're going to work much more closely with the regulatory associations and the operators themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Anyone else with questions for Steve Song? Great opportunity to talk to someone who's been engaged for quite a while in both regulatory policy, technology, and mapping. I will say as an anecdote, Steve, I spent some time in Armenia working with the regulator in 2004 to 2006. We were mapping out some hikes with GPS handhelds, and those were illegal at the time. You weren't allowed to map anything. It was a throwback from a different time. That has changed. And just to highlight how really amazing some of this work that you're doing, Steve, is that I put a note in the chat about broadband mapping in the United States. I've been involved with some small communities who are trying to protest some of the data coming out of the FCC, and the FCC has kindly opened up windows to allow for that type of protest. But if you're a new operator and you're trying to become a last mile operator to serve a community that's unserved or underserved, and yet the maps that a regulator might have would indicate, quote, that the community is served and that there's fiber, to Steve's point, if you use some of the open data standard, you could actually push back and say, look, no, there isn't, and or it needs a little bit of competition to bring in some redundancy and resiliency with another network, like the community networks or muni networks or small ISPs, for-profit and not-for-profit. So I see huge value. Okay, if there's no other question, Steve, thank you so much. And could you, is your email here? Yes, it is. So if you want to ping Steve, Steve, can people reach out to you via email? Yes? Okay, I think we can't hear you. I'm going to turn my microphone off. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you very much, Steve. We appreciate it. We know it's not early there in Nova Scotia, so thank you. All right, Mark Briere is up next. I'm going to queue up the slides. Give me 2 seconds. Et voila. And we have a video that we're going to play, and Jane's going to try and manipulate this. So we have your presentation up, Mark. So over to you.
Hi. And thank you. Bonjour, then good morning. And I'm very glad to be here and presenting here at GAIA physically, and being engaged for internet exchange and public peering in general for years, and especially for the African region. And then based on the, I did a thesis, especially on software-defined networking, switching fabric for internet exchange. And over time, when I joined Tokyo University and IETF Lab, we continue to work and kind of pile up different things on upper layers to the management to provide some way to facilitate the usage of that switching fabric and all the different things that require to ease access to public peering through internet exchanges. Then I'm going to present you the works was called Holistics, which is the full stack management that we developed for small internet exchanges, with IJ, the Tokyo University, and the White Project. Next. And the first desire is to minimize effort, the cost and the risk for operators to operate internet exchange. Obviously, as internet exchange, by definition, is more than 3 operators. BGP has to connect together through a small switch or many switches in one location or many different locations, with those defined as internet exchange. Next. And then what we mean by cost and effort as a multi-dimensional cost and so, then you have the administrative cost and commercial. Next. Then the engineering and technical, as the hardware and infrastructure itself, then fibers and so on, switches and servers that you need for running your internet exchange. And next. And what the question, first we get two questions to try to identify where is the cost in normal operation for the effort and the cost for connecting, for example, a new IXP member. By new IXP member, I mean just connecting a new operator to the switching fabric, or an ISP, a CDN, whatsoever, to the Internet Exchange. Next. And we have different level of cost to connect the new member and the multi-dimensional cost and effort for everyone. And then where's the request to connect, the provisioning, the setup, validation, and maintenance. And yep. Then the highest part, when you just connect, you already have your switching fabric over there. But the main thing is you have to follow up and get the engineering, and so to connect, verify, validate the quarantine and full process and so on. Whereas obviously at the end the maintenance to maintain in operation the switching fabric with the new operator. Next. And the desire here is to minimize all the different steps here, and you don't have the quarantine, you don't have to engage with complicated knowledge and so on, and you just have to actually just plug the cable. That's at the end what we decide. Next. Another question is how we do when we actually want to add a new switch in a switching fabric, for example, or increase or do a new topology of your Internet Exchange switching fabric. Next. Same questions, and in this case we have a phase for designing, staging, and validation for pre-production as maintenance, and there's a different cost level. Next. Whereas way higher because the phase of designing and selecting which vendors and so on is the same thing for staging, and the validation for pre-productions means mostly post-staging and be able to get the entire configuration of the switches and switching fabric ready for productions, and maintenance was 24 services need to be there. And then the desire here is to minimize all the different part of it, all the stages. And then next. And the final goal is through a single web interface that you can manage all the different phases as designing and verifying and deploying and maintaining your switching fabric for the Internet Exchange. And then it could be done through a simple iPad or whatever web rather and smartphone whatsoever. Next. And we call this holistics, was reference of a book from the same author of the Hitchhiking Guide of the Galaxy, where the 42 numbers come up, and so. It's the full automation stack with a kind of zero-touch approach, and also the concept of push on green that we're going to introduce. Next. And we don't develop the entire existing tools for IXP Manager. We just an add-on of IXP Manager. For who does not know what is IXP Manager, it's a full tool set for Internet exchanges. It's been developed for more than a decade by INEX, so it's the Irish Internet Exchange. It's all free software, and there is more than today 200 IXP using that tool, and you can provide all the different stages and so, but it doesn't do the configuration, designing, and automation part. Then that's what we had with holistics. Next. Next. And then we just adding holistics to IXP Manager. Oh. And we love IXP Manager. That's the very good tools that we've been using for years. As I mentioned before, free open source software. It actually been based for guidance included and teach and implement the best practice, and so a smart, compliant, full stack managing platform, and you do more with less with this approach. It manages all the root server for the BGP and this part as looking glass, and so could be added, and monitoring is included, and so on. That we relay on that part with Holistics. Then what do we bring with Holistics? Next. Oh, sorry. Yeah. First, planning, designing. The planning itself was we do with IXP Manager itself. We do the provisioning through IXP Manager, and we introduce a new module. IXP Manager use PHP Laravel with modularity of PHP Laravel. We included a new module which is called Miru. Next. Then we have another module was included different container-based with Docker, and it's the same concept as people may know as Mininet, but we actually redeveloped it just specifically for Holistics. And these modules do the verifications. We get the different things that we plan with Miru and IXP Manager, and we actually emulating the entire network, including the new change inside Atos with the name of the module for verification. And then we go for the deployment after we actually verify all the different phase and testing we could do on Atos. We use Cerberus to do the third module that we developed just for the deployment. It's pushing the configs to the real switches in productions and maintain that state in production. Then we introduced automation from top to bottom for IXPs with plan, verify, and deploy. And everything is based on the switching fabric that is been designed during my thesis, was called the umbrella switching fabric, where we actually change all the broadcast packets into unicast. There's no more broadcast in the switching fabric. And there's no need and no more quarantine time. Whatever quarantine is when you have a new operator connecting, you actually verify he's not sending any not desired packets to the switching fabric, like BPDU, LLDP, CDP packets should not be there and should not be received by other members. Then in this case, the umbrella switching fabric just remove automatically this part, and you don't have to verify through a quarantine period. And then a point is, not all the vendor switch can support the umbrella switching fabric. Next. Then Miru, and for the provisioning. Next. This is a snapshot or screenshot of the IXP Manager web interface. Then we see the different interfaces per members, where the facility they have, the switch they connected, which physical port they connected, the speed of the port itself, and so on. Then we use those information from IXP Manager that we pull through the API of IXP Manager internally on the same server. Next. And those information has been used to get also the IPv4, IPv6, and MAC addresses. That's what we use for binding and actually configuring the switching fabric, the location, and IPv4, layer 3, and layer 2 information. Next. And Miru itself, think of most operator usually when actually whatever operator or network engineers, what do they start to do is just they stack on the table or on the rack the switches, and they start to do some of the topology, and at the end of the process they start to do the diagramming for maintenance and so on. Here we reverse everything. So you need to do diagramming, and that's the unique things you do, and it's finished. You see on the left, this is different boxes, and it's going to be seen on the demo video that we run later. You just have to drag and drop and do connect with links, the different boxes, and you design once for all. And then you can do different types of topology. Here is two different types on the screen. Next. Then visual network planning, that's what does Miru. Drag and drop diagramming as a network unique source of truth, and it generates automatically the configuration. And we emulate and test your network before deploying. That's what we do with Atos. That's the verifying place. And deploy with a single click at the end or through the same interface inside Miru. Next. Then Atos, just for next. Atos start automatically through a button through Miru. He tests different scenario, turning off the links, turning off the switches and so to test the redundancy and test the different accessibility across all the members, pinging in full mesh scenario, the reachability of the real states from the XP manager. When it's done, and then it say everything's passed, then you can deploy. Next. And the third one is Cerberus, or just to deploy. Then Cerberus, API support for XP Manager, and you have rollback and fail state integrations. If you want to roll back, it's there. And then and he transferred the network config directly from the controller to the switches. Just to resume, visualization of the different plan from the management plan that you have the planning with Miru, verify with Atos, and deploy with Cerberus. And then the switching fabric with the umbrella switching fabric and so, and with the monitoring parts that you can actually see what's going on in the traffic use and with using what at what level, what traffic it is between operators and what you want. And it enforces the concept of push and grain for when everything is okay, you can deploy and you don't take any risk. Then we have a small video just to show you how easy it is just to bootstrap a new topology with 4 hosts connected each on one switch.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, thank you.
That.
And here we have we connected on 4 hosts, or represent the different 4 routers connecting to the switching fabric. They just ping one to each other's, but there's no ping getting through. Then now what we're going to do is we go on to our XP manager. We already pre-provisioned the same IPs and so on where they're connected on real switches. And switch 1, 2, 3, and 4 for physical port and so. Then we go on Miru. Then we see automatically 4 boxes where it's pre-provisioned the switches. We just have to drag and drop one by one. Then we link them, the topology of your choice, with obviously more redundancy and so, in terms of links. And then it automatically selects for you the port is available from the provisioning you did through IXP Manager for the backbone port you want, but you can change anyone you want in the desire of your choice to enforce this. Then now we start automatically Atos, and it start a full emulated environment, and it's not like Container Lab for who does not know this, but Container Lab is another project, but we did kind of similar things with Atos here. We have different containers to represent the different switches, and then you test and get different scenario done. And at the end, you have the deploy button, that's what we just pressed. And automatically, all the different operator here were represented by 4 different hosts connecting to the real switches in the demo we did, start to ping each other's. And you've done. Next.
So
It is,
give me a sec.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a.
Yeah, we had to,
We have to
for the video, get a new
everything
sharing
down,
session.
and we have to go back to where we were. I think we're around slide 27. No. No, it's back, yeah? Where were you here? Yep.
Yeah.
Voila.
Then next. Yeah.
Okay. And we
Okay.
did it tomorrow. Bravo.
Okay. Then it's been deployed at the Toulouse Internet Exchange. And we also had at Pixie, was part of the White project for the programmable Internet Exchange here in Tokyo or Otemachi on 3 data centers. And then even we have now the Toulouse Internet Exchange been an operation moved to France AX. Then we have the different switches we had in Toulouse are in the test bed, the lab test bed of France IX, and then actually we're working with them and so. And then more than discussions with Civics, with Abidjan, and they're actually testing it on the software part, and we're looking forward to get also the switches next, and even at Kinix in Kinshasa. Then we're collaborating and so looking for IXP manager integrations and holistics at the end. Next. And then we're looking for anyone just for collaborating and as IXP or researchers or any interest in how we can facilitate peering and public peering in any regions where no IXP there. And we aim to get a long-term collaboration. And this is, yes, we published even a paper. Then if you want to have way more details on the architectures and choice we made, up to you. Read it. And good for question.
Okay, so if you're in the room, please do queue up from your computer. Is there anyone that has questions for Mark? We have a good 10 minutes if you have questions. We'll give it a minute. And just a reminder, if you want to join the queue, you click on the first icon that's farthest to the left under your name. It looks like a raised hand. And I'm just going to check the chat. Curtis is a fan. Looks like a great tool and initiative. And for those of you that are new to Gaia, we bring practitioners in like Mark, Steve, others who are actually operationalizing some of what you may theoretically work on. And so all the standards are wonderful, but you need to deploy them. And so this is some of the hacking that goes on and the different, obvious different instantiations that you're putting different tools together to, with IXP Manager and other, to increase the utility and create new functions and better deployments. So this is why we love Gaia, because it's often a bit more about the operationalization or the execution versus just theoretically how a network might work or an IXP. And I just have a question for you, Mark. I know some of the team that you work with in Kinshasa. I think thanks to a lot of the internet community, there's been some great training around the planet. How do you, when you go in to work with an IX in a country, how do you help train them on some of these tools, because they may not necessarily natively know them right away?
But the very first thing is IXP managers as a tools and part of the community. Holistics came next, and as the kind of long-term desire for them, just to having the switches is a good part, because what bring holistics is to facilitate for the configs, and so a simple layer 2 config on some switches could be okay, and so we inside this part. But the very first things we do is we help them to install IXP manager. We help them to get the best practice out of these tools with Fantastic. And as I say, 200 operators already using it. It just introduced the rest of the community we part of.
And I would say, for those that don't know, there's some peering forums around the world. An example of that is the African Peering and Interconnection Forum, or the Caribbean, the CARPIF. There's AFPIF, CARPIF, and others. Mark, you gave a presentation at AFPIF last year. Can you give the folks here in the room and online an idea of what that entails when you go to a big meeting like that and you're talking to many people at one time?
And it even start, we have also the IX with the Internet Exchange Associations. We an Internet Exchange Federation always do 1 day before meetings and discussion, and so we already start to engage with Internet Exchanging there and being part from this community of Internet Exchanges in general for long. And then we know each other specifically for Internet Exchanges, but also during the main conference that has AFPIF, as you mentioned. There is a lot of diverse type of operators and different interests for even for switching fabric for people to start as a single operator and not owning any internet exchange. Or they're looking to this and then they say, oh, that could be a solution. When just for they didn't think of maybe operating an internet exchange, but it facilitated this part. And it is also the level of knowledge in the region is different. Then the engagement is different with the people over there. And you spend kind of more time actually to build up knowledge and understanding the technology behind the peering in general.
Thank you for that. And for some of you that are doing work in other countries, I often will say this is the local training, where experts come in, work with other experts on the ground so that the knowledge is sustainably on the ground versus you flying in all the time, because that's not going to work. That would be the colonial method. What we talk about is making sure that you're training people on the ground for local sustainability and knowledge. And this is what a lot of the peering and interconnection forums, the IX associations, and as Mark just mentioned, there's AFIX, there's APIX, the Asia Pacific IX Association. There's LACIX, the Latin American and Caribbean. There is EuroIX. There is not a North American IX Association yet, but there are rumors, and I know some of the folks who are stirring up those rumors, to get more of an IX association going in North America, because there are some new IXs jumping up in the US and Canada. And another peering forum for those in this region is the BKNX forum that happens in Bangkok from time to time. Professor Kanchana, who has spoken here at Gaia in the past and who's the mother of the internet in Thailand, is helped stir that up with along with the IX from Bangkok, the BKIX. So if there's anything else you want to add, Mark, we can turn over to Yuri, who's up next.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you
Good
very
time.
much.
Thank you.
Great. And there's contact information for Mark and the team at the IIJ Lab on the last slide there. And Yuri's going to join me up here.
Thank you.
You bet. So let's get your slide. I think you should be live.
Okay. Good morning. おはようございます。サイバーグリーンの伊藤ゆりえと申します。Change. My name is Yuri Ito. I am from. I'm a founder and executive director of Cyber Green Institute, New York-based nonprofit organization focusing to improve the global cyber ecosystem's health through the metrics and measurement. Thank you very much for having me speaking with you today. So Cyber Green is a measurement nonprofit organization. Excuse me. As you might know, surprisingly, we currently do not collect consistent, high-quality data on cyber ecosystems health. We don't have a shared metrics and data on massive scale of cyber incident, breaches, and myriad of other risk factors within the internet. We also do not have a vital data, population data, and otherwise in cyberspace. Because of this, we cannot evaluate the effectiveness of cybersecurity measures, predict future outcomes, untangle the wider set of reasons behind the risks, and how and when attacks occur and what impact these attacks have. In my previous work at JP CERT, which was about 20 years ago, and my old colleague just arrived to this room. CERT writes advisories and reports, usually, And then, but we were told not to use the numbers because it's never the right numbers and it's misleading and it's just opinions. So, but at the same times, we hear policymakers and decision makers were demanding and then asking for the numbers. And I so often using the numbers, works really powerfully. So based on that experience, we started Cyber Green Institute. One of the most important conditions for enabling robust cooperation in cybersecurity, cyberspace, is the availability of cross-comparable statistics that empower decision makers to set policies based on evidence and establish priorities and view trends. Cyber Green focuses on raising ecosystem resiliency by developing a set of models and cross-comparable metrics to measure the internet ecosystem's health. The internet is vast, complicated, and infinitely interconnected, but our view of its extensive set of interrelated and interconnected risks is narrow and woefully incomplete. We believe addressing our shared risks by raising transparency of systemic risk landscape may be the most effective path to dramatic improvement in cybersecurity. Yes, the next slide. Yeah. And the next slide, actually. Sorry, I forgot to say the page. So as our proof of concept, we actually developed Internet Infrastructure Health Metrics Framework in 2020, in short, IIHMF. IIHMF is a set of models and metrics method to measure the internet infrastructure critical components health. Excuse me. We started scoring the public health of DNS, routing, and open services across the 250 countries and territories, started from last November. And this year, we plan to add 3 more components, which is email, security, certificates, and security protocols and services. Our scoring methodology and algorithm technical paper will be publicly available. We're conducting validation work next couple of months with the data and our scores. And we plan to, after the validation, we plan to publish the paper around June. But if you like to review in comments at this point, please reach out to me. I'm happy to share the method paper with you. Also, if you go to Cyber Green website, cybergreen.net, and go to the under research page, we're listing a bunch of white papers and technical papers of the Internet Public Health Model and this metrics framework. So please take a look at that. Next slide. So with that introduction, today, I'd like to share with you one of the model we developed with our lead scientist, Adam Shostak, which is called Cyber Public Health Model, which we applied public health style approach to address the cybersecurity issues. And I'd like to invite your critiques and collaborations to what we have discussed today. Next slide. Medical professionals in the dawn of 19th century faced outbreaks of infectious diseases such as cholera and smallpox. Using data-driven solutions, those early pioneers of public health revolutionized treatment and focus of the mitigation of infectious diseases. They started looking at the underlying issues causing the diseases and not just treating individuals that were already infected. Father of the epidemiology, Dr. John Snow, started population level analysis, not just treating, curing the individuals. And by doing so, identified the cause of the cholera was polluted, filthy water. In other words, also in other ways, it is about medicine and public health. Other much more recent public health experience we all had was COVID-19 pandemic. And then one of the core lessons of the public health model is that an individual has very little control over the risks they face. Our individual health is interconnected with the shared health of our community, and there are significant similarities in cyberspace. So we need to adapt a public health approach to cybersecurity by collecting and analyzing data on a massive scale, creating preventative approaches to shared risks, and developing a healthier, more resilient, and a more robust internet ecosystem for a global community. Next slide, thank you. So this is our approach to establish a science of cyber public health. Science starts with data, so our top priority is gathering a more comprehensive set of data and standardizing it for researchers. Public health community has an institutional mechanism to collect patients and health risk factors data. Like hospitals and clinics have a mandate to reporting infectious diseases, patients, data and records to CDCs, and then they collect internationally, they share internationally. We need to study with the sociology and institutional design experts to develop institutions and infrastructures to gather cyber population data in our cyber health. Next page. So this cyber public health, this is about a change of mindset and perspectives about the cybersecurity. Public health requires public-private partnership. It requires every layers of stakeholders. I love how our metrics special advisor, Dr. Dan Geer, told us the common good at that level only follows common efforts. And then it also encourages international collaboration rather than competition and drawing borders between allies and adversaries. So collective risks only addressed by the collective approaches to the mitigation. We started telling the stories and called for the collaboration at variety forums for last decades, and then start seeing, finally momentums last couple and few years. Regional organizations and policy making and internet norm building initiatives are now calling robust metrics and evidential data. So we're very excited. Next slide. I'd like to go back to the data. Again, our approach is data-driven. So we attempt to unlock the data and define them. For example,
We're back.
The next page, if you can.
We lost the connection first.
Perfect. Okay, so for example, how we're trying to attempt to unlock the data and define them. Example, so while we have this IIHMF, Internet Infrastructure Health Metrics Framework for ecosystems risk indicators, identifying the risk indicators and measurement, we also think the vital data in cyberspace is essential. It is common to see papers in top conferences citing Gartner as a justification for the relevance of the problem. We should start contrast this with the public health, where the causes of death are collected and published by credible entities. And many of these statistics are expressed relative to various populations. And in those population statistics are called vital statistics. Few vital statistics are available in cybersecurity, but we do not know how many, for example, computers are running in a country. We know how many are sold, licensed, or connected to various services, which is all not same. Without that, we cannot really measure incidence or prevalence of problems. And this limits our ability to assess if interventions are effective. So we should start a work in vital statistics for cybersecurity, including measuring populations, defining analogs to morbidity and mortality would also be useful. What is it in cyberspace? There are many scientific challenges in internet measurement, taxonomies and ontologies of harm. But if you are interested, we have started the cyber vital data's initial work, again with Adam Shostak, in published a technical paper on our website. So please take a look at that. And needless to say, but most importantly, we like to open data to researchers in industry, academia, NGOs, and governments to begin testing theories and knowledge sharing. So that's how we are, focusing about building this data foundation. Next slide. Last, I'd like to share our exciting project with the ASEAN countries. Cyber Green is conducting a project with the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia in short area to develop this cross-comparable statistics in internet health across its member states in East Asia. We have been working with area last 4 years, developing the model and metrics framework. And this year is going to be the early implementation phase of the scoring this year. And I'm very excited to update you about the efforts in near future. Next slide. So this is my last page. I would like to ask and call for collaboration. Please join us in an initiative to establish science of cyber public health. I think it's a very powerful model. And there are so many collaborations and support we like to have from the experts and operational community here, such as review and validate metrics, algorithms, and methods. Please send us comments and critics for improvement. Also, this vital data, cyber vital data, it's going to be a very, very important and powerful data. So help us define and unlock the cyber vital data and risk indicators. And then also, we also need to talk with the community and maybe policymakers, help design institutional design and mechanism for global scale data collection. And also, please join the Cyber Public Health Working Group. We jointly hosting with the Indiana University Ostrom workshop. If you go to this website, we started this workshop. Please subscribe the mailing list. We're actually having a monthly online discussion about how we can develop cyber public health, the science of the cyber public health, what type of research and policy do we need to establish this, and collecting this data, and then also sharing the relative research and studies. So please join us. And last, but it's critical, please empower the work by becoming a research partner and a sponsor. Please reach out to me. The contact is here, yito@cybergreen.net is my email. Looking forward to hearing from you and discuss about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And do you mind going up to this microphone?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Yuri? Make sure you click in the Meet Echo interface, the hand that's raised, if you would like to be in the queue to ask a question. Not seeing any questions yet. And Yuri, if you're working with the Indiana University, oh, there's one person. Okay, could you please identify yourself?
Yeah, sorry, my name is David. I'm just there. There we go.
Wonderful.
David. Just a very simple question. Where did the name green come from? I kind of was expecting a green talk and it was a cybersecurity talk. So
yeah, I know. We should name Cyber Red Cross or something. Before, when we started, it was public health was not in our model. So Cyber Green is really about, it's a different model rather than, focusing instant response in reactive activities. It is, more looking at the underlying environmental, causing factors and addressing that. That was the original motivation. It was to name Cyber Green.
Excellent. And I just have a quick question for you, Yuri.
Sure.
If there are other universities that want to work with you, is Indiana open to expanding that scope of university participation?
Yeah, sure. So we work with the University of Washington, Adam Shostak, and Curtis, actually, and then with his PhD student, data scientist, who's helped us a lot to building this model and identifying the risk indicators data set and help us collecting and building the algorithms, how to score. So that was a great partnership.
I would just note that there are some study groups in the ITU's development sector, which is generally emerging markets and developing countries. They might be very interested in this. So happy to connect you.
It's wonderful.
Okay. If we have no other questions, then we'll give Yuri a chance to sit down after an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Please see the contact information in the slides. And we'd just like to thank everybody that presented today.
Thank you.
And I'm going to give thank you, little round of applause for everybody. Thank you. Curtis, Mark, and Yuri, and Steve, Mark, and Yuri, and an excellent panel of experts here to give you different perspectives on operationalization, data collection, IXPs, and open data standards. So you know where all their contact data is and all the presentations. I would ask that, Curtis, if you want to if you'd like to mention the potential work that we might want to be doing on the lead up to San Francisco, I could turn it over to you for a sec and then we can close. I can also do a highlight for what will be coming. Oh, Juliana, sure. Juliana, you are in the queue, please.
Yes, I just want to mention that at 1 p.m. there is a side meeting on environmental impacts of technologies, and I think your work could be super helpful for that ongoing group, because there was an IAB workshop on environmental impacts of technologies last December, and they are trying to follow up on what happened in that workshop. And I think that this group would be there because there are many alternatives to the big model data-driven models that are developed here. So I invite you to participate. It's today at 1 p.m.
Thank you very much, Juliana. That's a good shout out for those of you that are here on site. And I just want to see, Curtis, did you want to hop in to talk about the potential work we might be doing moving forward through Gaia to edit some texts?
Yes, I'm here.
Over to
Hello,
you.
everyone. Jane and I have been chatting about potential things to do with the Gaia working group. Obviously, it's wonderful to have these wonderful speakers come in and share their work, but the goal of the working group is to do slightly more than that, and to produce things, specifically, of course, in the interests of global internet access. And so the first thing that we were discussing and wanted to bring to the Gaia group at large is the expansion of the RFP for the group, of which there was a draft created in the early days of Gaia, really specifying some of the terminology and technologies and best practices in kind of remote and frontier networks, and codifying those inside of the IETF. So that there's some formalism and something to point at for people trying to build out this. Now, we looked it over, and there is some stuff to be updated. Not as much as we had anticipated. It turns out still a lot of rural wireless networks, but there's no, for instance, no covering of LTE. I think a lot of the space networks have come in and are having fairly large impacts on the kind of networks that we care about, and an improved focus on IXPs as well. And so this is something that we'd like to start doing in Gaia, is to put together a group of folks who are particularly interested in expanding this and adding to it, and producing the next iteration of the Gaia RFP. So with that, Jane, I'll give you an opportunity to add anything you'd like, and then otherwise we'll get some commentary from anyone in the room, or both virtual and not, and see where that can go.
Excellent. And just as a highlight, I'll say that for San Francisco, we have already a presentation they were going to present here, but it turned out it would be better for them to do this in San Francisco. Some of the team from the Internet Society that's been standing up networks in Nepal. So that'll be a preview for the next Gaia meeting. And as Curtis is saying, by taking a look at the current RFP and updating it, information that, Mark, you have from the IXP work that you're doing, that I know ISOC and Packet Clearinghouse and others, to Curtis's point, can almost be a guide for people that are trying to stand up instantiations, but also community networks, municipal networks. One of the biggest questions that I had when I was at the Internet Society, and I still have now at Connect Humanity on occasion, is how do we start? Like, how do we just get moving? And part of it is this network of experts in Gaia. It's a network of experts, of course, here at the IETF, but it's also the practitioners around the world in the IX associations on the ground, and those that are often too shy to be connected in person like this or on video, but they will talk to you on the ground. And those people have a wealth of knowledge in their head from the local perspective. Dr. Kanchana once asked me, Jane, I've got a lot of corrugated steel in this small community that I'm working in within Bangkok. I'd love to get a small group of people together to talk about how to make sure that the signal and the frequency isn't interfered with by the corrugated steel, and what do I do? And so there are people that are looking for ways to highlight some of this data so that they can go to it, find it, and find the right people. So Curtis, I have to give Curtis all the credit for saying, Jane, let's reboot this. And so this is, as he's saying, a really important facet of what we want to do moving forward in Gaia. So Curtis, back to you. Are there any questions from anyone in the room or online about what Curtis has just highlighted for you as a highlight for San Francisco? IETF117.
I also pushed the RFP into the chat if anyone wants to take a look at what we have.
Bravo.
It's been about 5 years since the last draft.
And I bet Arjuna would love to. He'll be keen to help us. If there is, I don't see anyone online. Let me just check. You've stunned them with such great ideas, Curtis, that we'll work on this on the Gaia working group as well. So stay tuned. If you haven't joined the Gaia working group, we urge you to do that. We had some small technical glitches with some of the list, which we've managed to get unblocked. And we want to thank the IETF support for that. If there are no questions right now, then I think we can close a little early, give people some time back.
Jane.
But yep. Go for it.
One other element of this, which Jane spoke to lightly here, is sort of increasing the discussion around these topics. And so you'll just see more on the mailing list. But I really want to impart upon people that we strongly desire kind of technical discussions on the mailing list. And stuff like if anything popped out at you here that you didn't get your question answered or you came across it too late, shoot it off to the Gaia mailing list. We'll make sure that Yuri or whomever gets it and kicks off that discussion from there. I think it's been really hard through COVID for an international focused group like this. And we're really trying to reconnect with everyone doing this kind of work, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are feeling a little lonelier than they have in the past. And moreover, just another initiative after the RFC, we have been considering adding a chapter to the Systems Approach Open Source Networking book, which I will also link. And this is, I think, going to be similar in an extension to the RFC, but really focused on the educational components. And so if any of these jump out at people, again, feel free to reach out to us. I'm going to link the Systems Approach book in chat here in a moment once I can find it. I have to go to my, here we go. So this is now going into chat. This is what we use in my class at UW for our textbook. And it's a really great resource that's open source and rapidly updated by the authors through this mechanism. And I think there's a lot to add on kind of our experiences running these networks and refocusing. I think you see in these undergraduate networking texts a specific lack of depth on IXPs and these things that are a little farther away from the day-to-day elements of networking, especially because they're often industry focused, and pulling people into the big FANG jobs where IXPs are only relevant to a small number of people inside of Google. But obviously, I think they're critical to the overall network and the vision of the internet itself, which is things that we care about and the IETF cares about. So that's a next step we'd like to go from there. Again, just a call out, just to talk about it. And we're really going to focus on having this discussion in San Francisco and trying to start putting together a team to address these over the next bit after that. But after that, I'm done. We can end 30 minutes early. That's okay.
No, that's wonderful, Curtis. And just to highlight what you were just saying, I've been working with some people in the U.S., which is new for me, by the way. Some people might say you're an American, you've worked in the U.S. I haven't for 25 years. And recently with the broadband sort of epidemic with funding in the United States, it's many people have come to me and said, well, an IXP is just a data center. I'm like, no, it's really not. So what you're saying, Curtis, is even more relevant to the situation today to make sure that we get the alternatives out there. The US is probably a different type of market, but we want those small IXs recognized that are bringing competition and resiliency of the fabric recognized, as well as those around the world. So, and all the great work that many of you are doing. So a shout out to everybody that participated today. Thank you very much. A shout out, by participation, I mean remote and in the room. I think this is the most we've had for Gaia in the room since the pandemic. So yay. And it is kind of fun to be back in person. And I want to just thank our hosts again. Mark is one of our hosts, but thank the Meet Echo team too, because I don't think they often, and the AMS team, they're often not recognized. I mean, they are, but they were recognized last night during the plenary. But I want to recognize them in person and thank them for their help this morning in getting us set up so that we could make sure everybody had all their presentations in order. So thanks again, and we'll close this Gaia 116 right now. Thank you very much. See you all in San Francisco, online or in person. Take care. Thank you both. That was excellent. Yuri, I remember you from CCTLD World, yeah? Were you doing work with CCTLD? Or AP? Yes.